Good evening, parents and guardians. I'm Amanda Fagan, the principal of Ledyard High School, and I'm pleased to welcome you back for this unusual but long-awaited 2020-21 school year. Thank you for joining us here for our Back to School Night, a slightly different format, but one that I hope works for all of us as we work to stay safe and socially distant as this seemingly endless pandemic continues. I'm going to walk you through a series of slides this evening, the focus being where we've been, where we are now, and what our focus is as we move forward. At the end of my presentation, I will give you a little bit of instruction as to what to do next to navigate your way through our back to school night. So at some point I may need to hide my face down here in the corner, but I think it is important for you to see my facial expressions and my engagement, and to just know that I am so pleased for each one of you to have put in the time to come here this evening and get a look at your students' school, your students' teachers, learning spaces, and a bit about what's going on. So let's move forward, shall we? So let's go back in time a bit. Where were we? We were on Friday the 13th, which maybe explains this whole thing, of March, and we learned that schools would be closing for 2 weeks, what we thought was 2 weeks at the time, due to the spread of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. We stayed home and stayed home and stayed home, and when it became clear that the closure would be lasting longer than 2 weeks, we began a remote learning process on March 24th. We hung in there. Actually, before we even closed the schools, we learned that our winter high school sports tournaments were canceled. We hung in there through learning into our April season and learned that the spring sports season was canceled, much to the disappointment of our student athletes. And shortly thereafter, the governor announced that schools would remain closed for the remainder of the school year. At that time, we were about 4 weeks to go in the school year, and it certainly did take the wind out of the sails of many of our students, particularly our seniors. But I would say that we rebounded with the most beautiful, most sunny, but comfortable parking lot graduation for our class of 2020. So while we were disappointed to have the spring end the way it ended, we did feel like we were able to give our seniors the farewell that they deserved. In that time, you can see from my tweet in the middle of the screen here that, like Governor Lamont, I was grateful throughout the spring to the Herculean efforts of our teachers. I was grateful for the perseverance and resilience of our students, but also to the parents. We spent some time trying to stay connected through the closure. One of the ways that we did this was each weekday of the closure, and there were 70 of those, I sent a newsletter in an 8 a.m. email to all of the staff and all of the students, the Colonel Closure Chronicles. These newsletters contained jokes, pictures, links to videos and activities going on in different classes, sometimes some inspirational remarks, sometimes some informational items, but each day we began the day with the Chronicles. Behind the scenes, teachers were working on this, Operation Kernel Connection. So this is just a screenshot of one tiny section of a spreadsheet that we maintained. Our goal was to be certain that every single student of Ledyard High School had contact with an adult at least once, if not more. And as you can see from this spreadsheet, it was typically more. I have, of course, covered the names of the students for privacy, but we used our own initials and a coding system to keep track of students so that we knew that we weren't losing anyone, missing anyone, having anyone feel too terribly isolated during this time. We also began all sorts of social media campaigns to try to keep our students engaged and remind them that they were missed and loved. And one of those were our daily birthday messages. Usually we do those on the announcements here in the school, but without the morning announcements, we moved them over to social media. And that was fun too, actually, to find interesting action pictures and shots from our candids in our yearbook photos to be able to send little birthday shout outs to each of our students. And you at home, I know, were working very hard as well. It wasn't just about the teachers and students, but the parents. I do sometimes take issue with the use of the word homeschooling because I think that it diminishes what teachers were doing during that time frame. But certainly parents and older siblings at times were responsible for more during the educational process than they had previously been accustomed to. So I found some of these funny memes over the course of the closure, and I kept saving them because I thought they were so accurate. In addition to being a high school principal and a mom to 3 school-age kids, my students during the closure were in grades 6, 4, and 2. So we had a pretty big range in terms of what their expectations and experiences were, and I know that many of you can relate to some of these silly memes. But despite the frustrations, we continued to create. Our music students continued to work with Mrs. Cometa and Mr. Thomas virtually to create ensemble pieces, with each student recording from home, at times collaborating with other music groups. We even made the news on a number of occasions. Both our band and choir made the news. We crowned our prom royalty in an attempt to have some sense of normalcy. Carol Schwenk, our junior class advisor and our Career Center coordinator here at the high school, made incredible signs. We drove all around town one day to crown not just the king and queen for the juniors and seniors, but all of their court members as well. We hosted a virtual spirit week with 5 COVID themes, if you will. So instead of twin day at school, our dynamic duo day, we had quarren twin day or quarren triplet day if you're the Poltons. Instead of hat day, we had not a hat day. Instead of tacky tourist, we talked about tacky, where would you like to tourist if we were able to travel during COVID. So all sorts of ways just to try to keep students connected and laughing and lighthearted a little bit. We ran all sorts of Twitter competitions through the Colonel Closure Chronicles, attendance competitions, lots of Dunkin' gift cards were going through the mail to folks for their participation. So just tried to really maintain a sense of unity throughout the closure. And as we drew to the end of the school year, once we were certain we weren't returning, once our sports teams faced the certainty of no spring season, we reimagined our year-end awards and events. So our music program, our agri-science program, our sports program, and then just our senior scholarship night, all of those groups reconsidered the way we've previously done things and put together virtual events to still be certain that our students got the year-end that was befitting them. So to be able to acknowledge their accomplishments, celebrate their successes, and send them off into their futures with all sorts of support and love from us. And all of those sort of accomplishment and accolade pieces are great, but we continue to perform in the classroom. One of the most tangible bits of evidence of performance comes in regards to our AP exams, which were administered in May. Now, obviously, the College Board had to scramble significantly as most schools across the nation were closed. They were able to transfer 2 weeks of online exams, or rather of in-person exams historically, into online exams, adjusting the format, adjusting the platform, and still honoring the fact that a score of 3 or higher is typically equitable to a college course credit. So our students took exams in 14 different content areas, and in 9 of those content areas, our students well exceeded, in fact, the state average. So our kids really, despite the adverse situation that they were facing and less than ideal learning standards, they were able to still really perform. Most notably, perhaps, in these 5 categories of AB Calculus, Chemistry, Physics 1, Spanish, and U.S. History. In these 5 categories, not only did our students absolutely crush the state standard, which is a credit to their work ethic and also to the consistency and diligence of planning and instruction from those teachers in those content areas. So not only did they crush the state standard, they also, in these 5 categories, our students earned the highest average score in 6 years in each of these categories. So really just outstanding performances across these 5 content areas. It's also worth noting that in both Spanish and English language, 100% of the students who took the test, and it was no small number in either of those cohorts, 100% of students scored a 3 or higher, which means that 100% of students who sat for that test have the possibility of earning college credit. So some really, really nice accomplishments from our seniors and juniors, a few little sophomores, but generally seniors and juniors last spring. Now, what they didn't get to do was take the SAT last spring. So I know that some of our seniors are nervous about having an SAT score for college applications. I have two things to say about that. One is that our seniors do have the opportunity to take the SAT next Wednesday, September 23rd, and we have just about 120 of our 165 seniors signed up for that. So that's great. Students are seeking that opportunity to get that standardized test score. I would also add that colleges across the country are demonstrating lenience in terms of the SAT scores for this year, with the awareness that most schools across the country were closed for the spring and that most students in America did not have the opportunity to sit for the SAT. Many schools are waiving the SAT requirement or lowering its value in terms of the total application package. So we do have a bunch of our seniors taking the SAT next week. And our sophomores and juniors will be taking the PSAT in October, so Thursday, October 22nd. Parents of freshmen and seniors, you may be fast forwarding and wondering, what about my kids that day? We'll be sending you an adjusted schedule, but depending on whether we're in hybrid or full, it will depend on how our students attend that day. And our current juniors are slated to take the SAT school day March 24th. So that's the required sitting of the SAT, which counts for the state accountability exams, but it's also that free first opportunity to take that test towards college applications. So that was the test that our current seniors missed last spring. Hopefully our current juniors will be on track to take that in March. So overall, during the closure, our attendance rate over the 12 weeks was 93.2%. That's pretty good. There certainly was a little bit, I'll hide my face here so you can see these numbers, certainly a bit of a drop off at the end. Some of that is due to the fact that we did not have any new instruction in week 12, so some students did not have to attend that week, although it was better than the week before that with 89.7%. But overall, just really strong attendance. I think that teachers and students worked well together. There was lots of communication. There was lots of flexibility in terms of due dates, given that we were really making up this educational mold as we went along. And I really can't speak highly enough of course, the teachers nationwide, but I'm particularly partial to the ones here at Ledyard High School who worked so hard to create a continuity of learning for kids to continue to provide connections and obviously access to the content and skills of their courses. So really strong attendance throughout the spring. And I will say that last year's sophomores, our current juniors, really just crushed it with attendance. They won pretty much every day. I was often running sort of a running scorecard in the Kernel Closure Chronicles, and the sophomores were incredible with their attendance and consistency. So at some point, we're going to owe them a reward. I promised them an ice cream social, but maybe when we're allowed to be a bit more social, that can happen. So that's where we were. Where are we now? As you all know, we're operating on the hybrid model with our cohort A and B, or blue team and white team. We use both of those monikers. I know some folks get confused because we have A days and B days in our schedule, and then also A cohorts and B cohorts. Some folks stumble on those. So we think of cohort A as the blue team and cohort B as the white team. Each team is doing 2 days of in-person and 3 days at home. I just wanted to share the breakdown of numbers with you right now. So we have 329 students coming to us on the blue team and 319 coming to us with the white team. And we have about 118 students who are opting out. So they're doing full virtual instruction. And then we have an additional 9 students who attend all 4 days, and that is based upon exceptionalities made due to qualification for special education services. So this is the breakdown of our students. You can see the numbers are really manageable on the blue day and the white day, and relatively equal. And so how large are the classes? I know that's been a question that we've received from quite a few parents. Fortunately, they don't look like this little cartoon. The smallest class is 0 kiddos. I'll talk about that in a second. And the largest is 18 kiddos. So that's the number of students in one class on a given day based upon cohort. So that the zeros, those are actually numbers that there's two classes that have 0 on one day or the other, and that is because we actually manipulated that. So both of those are AP courses, which have a lower enrollment to begin with, and based on where the cohort fell out, one of them had one student on one side and the whole rest of the class was on the other, and the other had 2 students on one side and the entire rest of the class was on the other. So we did make some adjustments with parental permission to swap some cohorts around so that those poor students were not just stranded by themselves while the rest of the class got to be together. So that's why the zeros. After the 0, our smallest cohort is 2, and that is in a transition study and org course. So that's a sort of a structured study hall, which teaches study skills, executive functioning, and transition skills to special education students. And those are by nature small classes to begin with, so that the 2 on the one side is not particularly alarming. And most of our classes are probably somewhere in the 8 to 12 range. When we return to full enrollment, we do have 65 sections of first semester classes with 20 or more students in them. So I know that's a question that I've received as well, is if when we go back to full, how large are the classes? So 65 of our classes will have more than 20 students in them. And of those 65, 50 are in core area classes. And when I say core area, I mean mathematics, science, English, social studies, and world language. The reason why I make that specification is just because I know some folks think, oh, well, of course the PE classes are big, or the choirs and the band are big, and they are. But just to be clear, 50 of the 65 are not PE or choir or band. They are core area classes. And our largest core area enrollment is 26. So we do have some pretty big sections for this first semester. And second semester, the numbers are very similar. It's actually 64 sections of second semester classes with 20 or more students. And again, similar breakdown in terms of core area classes being the significant portion of that. So I want to tell you or show you a little bit about classroom setup as we're talking about classroom sizes. So these are just some pictures of, just different classroom setups around the building. So over here in this top left picture, you'll notice pairs of desks. I want to be clear that this isn't for 2 students to sit hip to hip like that. It's one student sits in one seat, and then the other seat is the student's stuff. So they put their backpack over there. They can, push their Chromebook over to the other side if they need a workspace. So each student has sort of a little workspace in this classroom setup. Everywhere, a common theme is that desks are all pointing in the same direction. So you won't see horseshoes, you won't see arches. Our students are all facing forward in the same direction. In some of our specialty courses, this is a picture of the art room or one of the art rooms. We've taped off the table space so you can see that 3 students sit at the table and they have a particular work area designated for them. And our teachers, it's tough to see, but they've actually labeled where the stool goes so that students aren't sitting, 2 side by side on the same side of the table. The stools go on the end there, so everyone kind of has their own workspace. We also have some trifold plastic dividers. They're not pictured there, but some trifold plastic dividers for our art classes and our science classes to help provide an additional level of comfort and safety for those table settings where obviously we cannot rearrange kids and we can't always prevent them from facing one another. Over here, you'll notice that we have pushed aside the desks that we don't need in some classrooms, and that maximizes the floor space to spread out the desks that we do need. So teachers will take a look at how many students are in their largest cohort and then be sure they have enough seats out on the floor for that, and then they've pushed the others off to the side. And finally, every classroom has readily accessible hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes. The students enter the room, they use the hand sanitizer on their hands, each kid grabs a wipe and wipes down their desk and workspace, so they begin each class knowing they have clean hands and a clean workspace. So our focus now that we're back after a very long period of separation, our number one focus is individual health and well-being. And I want to be clear that that relates not just to the children in our building, but to the adults in our building as well. The virtual learning model in the spring, as many of you parents who worked from home know, is difficult because you never leave the office. You never step away from your workplace. When your workplace is your kitchen table or your office desk or your bedroom, it's really difficult to step away from that. And that's for students and teachers alike. So we're focused really on individual health and well-being, on supporting kids, on trying to find creative ways to get to group connections and community building. So it's tough. We know that our freshmen feel nervous coming into high school to begin with. That was amplified by the fact that we weren't able to have an in-person orientation, though we tried to release a series of videos and activities to try to help kids feel like they kind of had a clue what was going on or what to expect. And we built that whole first week around orientation for all students to our new routines. It's tough. Our freshmen probably still feel a little disconnected here in this third week. That's made more challenging by the fact that everyone's face is half covered by a mask. So it becomes difficult to recognize folks, to know who's who, to remember which kid is which. So we're working on that health and well-being for everyone in our school community and forging connections and building that community again. Of course, we're focused on the content and skills associated with our courses. This is school. There is a difference in this fall's model versus the spring's model. The spring's model was entirely asynchronous, meaning students worked kind of at their own timing and their own pace. We did not hold them accountable to firm deadlines because we could not be certain what home situations were like, how consistent internet access was, what childcare responsibilities our older students might be responsible for. But now we're sort of tightening that up a little bit. This is school. I get tired of the phrase the new normal, but this is the new normal. And it's important for our students to understand that they have to commit themselves to their academics. We shifted to the 4x4 schedule to make it so that students had fewer courses to juggle and balance, which we know was a stress point in the spring. But we do have firmer deadlines. We do have homework. We do have accountability in a way that we did not have as much of in the spring. So that's certainly an adjustment period. And hand in hand with that goes our fourth area of focus, which is on 21st century skills that are associated with success in life beyond Ledyard High School. And that sort of just relates to that persistence and resilience factor. So I think the adults can recognize that the closure is stressful. It's isolating. It's depressing. There's a lot going on in our world. And it's not a political statement to point out that we have a great deal of civil unrest in America. We have natural disasters that are alarming to folks, discomforting to folks. We're, of course, in the midst of a global pandemic. Our very way of life has significantly changed. Some of our student athletes face the disappointment of season cancellations, particularly our football players. So there's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of things that stimulate our senses and not always in a positive way. One of the messages that we're trying to convey is that we have to demonstrate or practice self-care. That's back to that first item, individual health and well-being. But that we also have to cultivate resilience and persistence. And so that's back to that number 4, 21st century skills associated with success in life beyond Ledyard High School. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel stress at times. It's okay to feel sadness at times. And what we need to concentrate on as a school and as a community is how do we persevere and find good ways to cope through those things. So those are the things that we're hoping to support our students through. So yes, we're certainly teaching content and skills, and we're also teaching character. And we're trying to partner with you at home to do those things. So that's the focus now. Ultimately, we want to end up like these 3 happy little fingers, being close to each other once again, and being connected, and most importantly, smiling. I know it's been a long stretch here. So what's the plan for this evening? So this evening at virtual back to school night, you'll want to have the class schedule for your student handy. If you have multiple students, you might be looking at multiple schedules. Of course, you can see those in PowerSchool. You can ask your students to sit right with you and walk you through their schedule. Ask them to write it down. There's no right or wrong way to do it. On the website here, our back to school website, on the home page, you'll notice that there are buttons to get to each individual department. So you can click on those buttons to get to the department, and then within each department, you'll see a list of teachers, and you can look for the teachers on your student's schedule. So every teacher has a short introductory video to help you put a name to a face and to see the classroom that teacher works in, where the class occurs. We hope you'll peruse the info items. They've all answered some common questions to give you just contact information and some information about them. And many teachers have also opted to link you to supplementary materials so that you can learn a little more about the syllabus, the expectations, the pacing, their Google Classroom, their classroom website, things like that. And of course, you can move at your own pace tonight. That's the beauty of it. You can spend 5 minutes or 5 hours if that's what floats your boat. And you can look through all of the different teacher profiles. You can watch all the different movies that you want. Or you can be done here and, go back to binge watching Game of Thrones. That's fine too. So move at your own pace and wrap it up when you're ready. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please go ahead and use that contact information you'll see next to each teacher. They've all shared their email addresses. Or, of course, you can reach out to me at afagan@ledyard.net. It's all A's, AFAGAN @ledyard.net. I can't really articulate as clearly as I would like how thrilled I am to be back in the building. I'll take this hybrid model. It's fine. It's so much better than nothing. And to see the kids come off the bus in the morning, to start to have the casual, jokey back and forth with kids each morning, I think it fills all of us up. This is why we came to education. We take very seriously the bonds that we have with our students. We're going to push them, but we're also going to love them. And we're going to treat them like our own kids while they're here with us each day. So I'm thrilled to have them back with us. I'm thrilled for all of you who have come here tonight to be a part of our back to school night. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Truly, that's why we're here. So with that, I shall end my sharing and send you on your way.